Good afternoon. Our topic today, what is capitalism?
Commodity fetishism is perhaps Marx's most misunderstood concept in all of Capital Volume 1. Commodity fetishism is introduced towards the end of Chapter 1, under the heading, Fetishism of the Commodity and its Secret. So it sounds like in this section of the text, we're looking for two different things. Number one, a definition of commodity fetishism, and number two, the secret of the commodity. Marx begins his discussion on commodity fetishism by stating that the analysis of the commodity brings out that it is a very strange thing, abounding in metaphysical subtleties and theological niceties. As soon as it emerges as a commodity, it changes into a thing which transcends sensuousness. It not only stands with its feet on the ground, but in relation to all other commodities, it stands on its head and evolves out of its wooden brain grotesque ideas, far more wonderful than if it were to begin dancing of its own free will. So Marx is identifying a supernatural characteristic of the commodity and wants to reveal the social relations that give rise to this supernatural characteristic. As we discussed in the last video, the commodity not only has a material characteristic, but also an immaterial social characteristic that emerges through its exchange relation with all other commodities. Classical political economy recognized exchange values and exchange relations, but failed to explain how they came into being. The exchange value of the commodity, therefore, remains a mystery to classical political economy, and in place of a thorough scientific analysis, they invoke metaphysical or theological explanations. Marx ridiculed classical political economy's thought experiments that imagined what Robinson Crusoe, a fictional character shipwrecked on a lonely island, would do to organize his productive life. Rather than looking at the real world of social relations on a macro level, they entered the realm of fiction to imagine the reality of an isolated individual, and thus overlooked the social character of commodity production. But perhaps the most well-known example of this fetishism revealing itself in classical political economy is in Adam Smith's famous invocation of an invisible hand, or the hand of God, guiding the processes of the market. This type of idea results from the fact that classical political economy, at its micro level of analysis, could only see individual exchange relations and did not thoroughly grasp the macro processes of circulation, exchange on a social level. Marx saw how commodity fetishism, which created a gap of knowledge, was being filled with idealist explanations, and instead, he sought to fill it with a scientific analysis grounded in the historical and social nature of the commodity. He explained that the commodity emerges under specific social relations that, in their totality, provide the conditions for existence of the commodity. The conditions he identifies are mass production, private production, and alienated labor. Mass production gives rise to the world of commodities, and it's only when commodity production becomes general that we can abstract from particular commodities and conceptualize the exchange value of commodities in general. Before the epoch of general commodity production, prices were arrived at quite accidentally. It wasn't always clear if the commodity being sold had a greater or lesser exchange value than the commodity being purchased. Mass production not only generalized commodity production, but generalized exchange values as well. The second precondition is that commodities are produced through private production with alienated labor. Commodity production only emerges when social labor is divided and commodity ownership is individualized on a private level. Under these conditions, owners of commodities are not only alienated from each other, laborers are alienated from owners. Laborers are also alienated from the commodity as well as each other. It's only when society becomes divided into a mass of atomized individuals with their own private property that the process of exchange is required, and thus exchange value of the commodity emerges as well. So when the commodity is produced under conditions of private production, it appears as though this supernatural characteristic emerges from the commodity itself, and it therefore becomes attributed to the commodity as part of its inherent features. As Marx says, the mysterious character of the commodity form consists therefore simply in the fact that the commodity reflects the social characteristics of men's own labor as objective characteristics of the products of labor themselves, as the socio-natural properties of these things. So from here, the commodity takes on a social life of its own and becomes fetishized, endowed with supernatural characteristics. This commodity fetishism does not emerge from the physical properties of the commodity itself, but is nonetheless derived from the central feature of each particular commodity, its exchange relation with other commodities. Here, producers create relations between each other through commodity exchange, while commodities themselves relate to each other through relative exchange relations. This is what Marx means when he says that commodities become social hieroglyphs that are fetishized to produce material relations between people and social relations between things. Commodity fetishism is therefore an objective social condition that emerges from the social processes that begin with the dual characteristic of the commodity itself. Commodity fetishism is not an individual disposition or an intellectual failure to grasp the nature of commodities. It is an external relation that unfolds outside of the will of any one producer and attaches itself to every product that is created. It specifically emerges under conditions where commodity production is not only generalized, but where commodities are privately produced with alienated labor for their exchange value. This is why commodity fetishism is such a central concept in Marx's theory. It's the primary feature of every commodity, a feature that is inscribed into it by every social relation in the process of its production. It's also the feature of the commodity that provides some insight as to why classical political economy was unable to grasp the origin of exchange value in socially necessary labor time. In failing to abstract to the level of the social, and instead remaining at the level of the atomized individual, classical political economy was unable to recognize socially necessary labor time as the origin of exchange value, and instead attributed exchange value to the commodity itself. This is the secret of the commodity that commodity fetishism conceals. So, commodity fetishism, the mystical, theological, metaphysical character of the commodity, emerges historically by imbuing human characteristics and social constructs onto the production of commodities themselves. When we reach the modern epoch, where commodities assume the form of quantitative exchange values, they take on these human characteristics as their own and appear to stand on their own 2 feet. Marx half-jokingly adds that if commodities could speak, they would say this: "Our use values may interest men, but it does not belong to us as objects. What does belong to us as objects, however, is our value. Our own intercourse as commodities proves it. We relate to each other merely as exchange values." The half-joke here is attributing human qualities to commodities, such as the ability to speak. But the half-truth here is that commodities are already imbued with human characteristics and social constructs which are recognized as their own. So it's not a stretch to imagine that commodities have a social identity or even a personality of their own as well. This is the mystical or theological character of the commodity, which has helped give rise to all sorts of fantastic theories and descriptions of the world. We can see how advertising really plays off this idea and even tries to imbue the brand names of commodities with personal identities. Apple is innovative, Nike is athletic, Mercedes is luxurious, Supreme is trendy, Monster energy drinks are extreme, and on and on and on. Marx himself points out how religion embraces commodity fetishism in this way, by attributing the mysteries and mysticism of commodity fetishism to supernatural forces. In this way, our alienation from the commodity shows its reflection in our alienation from God. Towards the end of the chapter, Marx provides us with a rare glimpse of what his vision looks like for a future society that overcomes the production of commodity fetishism. The religious reflections of the real world can, in any case, vanish only when the practical relations of everyday life between man and nature generally present themselves to him in a transparent and rational form. Let us finally imagine, for a change, an association of free men, working with the means of production held in common, and expending their many different forms of labor power in full self-awareness as one single social labor force. Labor time would in that case play a double part. Its appointment in accordance with the definite social plan maintains the correct proportion between the different functions of labor and the various needs of the associations. On the other hand, labor time also serves as a measure of the part taken by each individual in the common labor, and of his share in the part of the total product destined for consumption. Marx identifies that it's not this or that aspect of commodity production which creates commodity fetishism. It's the totality of social relations together: mass production, private production, the division of labor, exchange values, etc. All of these aspects need to be present and relate to each other in a particular way. And we can get a sense of this when we see that he argues that socially necessary labor time will continue to play a role in future society as a means of generally determining the equitable distribution of the social product to individual workers. So while socially necessary labor time may reflect the exchange value of a commodity in the modern epoch, it will continue to act as a source of measurement of value in future society under a system of social production and distribution. Socially necessary labor time will therefore still have its quantitative character, but will cease to attach itself to and represent an exchange value. Okay, so that basically wraps up Marx's argument on commodity fetishism. I think it's important to keep in mind that commodity fetishism is not an idea or a failure to grasp the true essence or the true nature of commodities. It's an inherent feature of mass commodity production, where commodity production takes place through private production using alienated labor. So there's these three historical social components that create the general conditions for commodity fetishism to emerge. It's not something that exists in our minds or in our understanding of the world. It's something that exists externally to us and in the world itself. And this commodity fetishism helps conceal the secret of the commodity, which is the fact that commodities' exchange values don't emerge necessarily through the exchange relations they have with other commodities, but through socially necessary labor time. This is the origin of exchange values and the secret of the commodity.